And we are back. Continued coverage of the Eastern Division of the Pro Chess League. Grandmaster Robert Hess here with International Master David Pruis. David, we had an exciting first primetime matchup between Russia and China. Which of these three matches ahead are you most excited for?
If the Croatia Bulldogs pull an upset, then I'm most excited for that. If not, I'm most excited to see my boy Sargsyan and the Armenia Eagles 2 times in a row Final Fours the last 2 seasons of the PCL. And, he's now 2,600 instead of 2,450 and still over 3,000 on Chess.com. Maybe now he's more like 3,200 instead of 3,000. So I'm looking forward to that.
It's funny because back when he was lower rated, people were like, who is this guy? Now everybody knows, right? The world of chess is no longer like, wait, Sargsyan, do I know this player? Is that Gabriel Sargsyan? No, this is Sargsyan, and he is an absolute force for the Armenia Eagles, and a team that has been successful in pretty much every Pro Chess League season. They've made it to the finals, but this year will be much tougher considering that there's no rating cap, so their 2,600 across the board might just be outmatched by a team like St. Louis. However, we just saw Vlad Dobrov at 2,478 classical rating. He's way better than that in the Pro Chess League.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't worry about St. Louis for now. I think they're in another division and in another league. So I would say the question is, can Armenia compete with Russia, who we just saw beat China? Can they compete with China, who's been in the Final Four for 2 years in a row as well, now in their division with them? So that's like, extra competition in the Eastern Division. And can they compete with the Indian team, which is going to be really sick too, in my opinion. So that's who they need to worry about, right? Because top 4 teams get into the playoffs. That's 3 really, just top chess nations, right? Russia, China, India. So I think the question is, can Armenia beat those guys? Can they compete at that level? And the answer is going to be Zavin Andriasian.
Okay, so you're a believer in Zavin Andriasian. He is clearly an X factor.
I don't know. He's my question. He's like the question that answers the question, because 2 years ago, he was dominant. And last year, he had a very mediocre year. If they can get back Zavin from 2 years ago, then Martirosyan and Shant from 2 years ago could be a playoff team this year.
Fair. And we have so many of these games open. Right now, we're looking at Pragnananda, the Indian prodigy, and nearly 2,600 himself. And it's very funny when you see some of these young Indian players have invites to these elite events like the Tata Steel Rapid and Blitz, where you saw Nihal Sarin with like a 1,700 rating at one point. So their rapid ratings have not caught up to their classical strength. But here with the white pieces, it does seem like Pragnananda, he's chilling. That's the best way to put it. It's a King's Indian attack, slow moving. He's just trying to outmaneuver his very talented opponent, Tuan Min Le, because he's known. He's a really well-known player in Title Tuesday events and various Chess.com events.
Yeah, Prague is 14, and he's just crossed 2,600. So that 2,586 rating everybody's seeing, that's December. That's already 1 month old. In January, he crossed 2,600. I don't think many 14-year-olds have crossed 2,600.
No.
So so that's big news. But Tuan Min is like that. He's like the star of the Bulldogs. Wonderful time. He's a top player on Chess.com, on the top, bullet list all the time. And he was the top player for the Pittsburgh Pawn Grabbers last season. And, he may be able to go, 4-0 against a GM team of all 2,600 plus opponents. We'll see. I think that's what he's probably aiming for.
And they need it, right? Because Croatia, they won the qualifier just to get here. And as you were saying earlier, team of international masters going up against GMs. Well, they've already proven that they can outpace a team of very strong grandmasters in the qualification stages. And now here they are in the real deal in the season itself. So, Pragnananda, we can keep on going through games. Are there any games going on right now that have caught your eye, David?
Not yet. I'll keep you posted as I click through a bunch of them. But at the moment, I was just on this Pragnananda game and 1 or 2 others. But I'll click around. There's a weird situation already between Petrosian and Gledura where Petrosian is trying to say like, hey, I won a pawn in 10 moves.
Okay, let's go over to that game between Tigran Petrosian and Benjamin Gledura. So pulling that up here, we see that, well, there's a bishop on d6 and white is up a pawn. So this looks bad, to say the least. Right?
Yeah, that was what I was thinking. That's what I was thinking. It was like, how is he going to get his pawn back? I don't really see it. He's a little bottled up.
That's a brilliant piece on the d6 square. Hold up, we're just still on the Prognananda game, so need to move over to the Tigran Petrosian game. Give me a sec. And okay, we got it now. Okay, good. So the bishop on d6, looking very strong, cemented in there. The extra pawn, it's a double c pawn for the time being, but you can't get at the base pawn on c3. This knight on f3 might go to d4 at any moment. David, it might already be losing for black. Yeah,
it's certainly possible. I mean, if he can't do anything about this, then he's got. Yeah, I mean, there's enough factors for white to win. So he really needs something. I don't see how he can play knight e8. I don't see how he can play knight e4. Bishop f8 doesn't seem very effective at this point since it just sort of adds weak dark squares to the list of problems and doesn't yet really threaten to win a pawn on b4, c3. I don't see anything.
And Tigran's chilling. See him on camera. He just like, what is his posture? Is he like on a couch, just lying down? I don't know what's going on there, but he seems very happy about his position. That's for sure.
I just saw this like piece of architecture yesterday from the UC San Diego campus where they like had like a huge university building, and then they took a little cottage and put it like diagonally on the edge of the building. And I saw it and I thought, well, all your furniture would slide down to like one side of the house, and it looks like Tigran's kind of like sliding down his downhill here.
Yeah, I wonder if he's like playing on an iPad and just really relaxing. Have some music on in the background, but he's giving Armenia a good start to the season because right now his position is fantastic. I have a lot of experience playing against Tigran, both in Blitz, but also in the Fisher Random qualifier. We were in the same knockout bracket. We had a very intense matchup, and he's incredibly quick as a player. So, his position is very good. Gledura in big trouble thus far.
Yeah.
All right, so let's keep our eyes on this game, but perhaps there are other games too.
I'm currently searching for David Navara because, big name.
Let's see, where is David?
I'm clicking around. I've got like 15 games open. I'll find him at some point here.
Yep. And
I've got him. He's playing Shant. Oh my goodness.
Okay.
My like two favorite players of the day, pretty much. One of them must lose. That's sad. Okay.
Well, we have David Navara with the black pieces. This reminds us of the game between Tomaszewski and who was black in that game? Was it Wen Yang? Like this structure.
Yes.
And there's a backward pawn on e3 and the problem pawn on g4.
Yeah, there used to be a pawn on f4, so it's everything.
Where'd it go? Oh, okay.
It recaptured a knight on e5 and then got challenged on f6.
Nice. So just opening the position up. Navara saying, hey, look at this. The more lines that are open for my pieces, I think the better black's position gets. And right now, the rook on h8 perfectly placed. The rook on f2 doesn't have access anywhere. f5, f6, f7, all covered for black. And bishop f5 is a way to get the rook a little bit of space. But this knight will come to f6, shut down the open f file. And as pointed out, the rook on the h file is already feels like just a better piece. And you could plant that rook on h3 at some moment. I would start with a move like knight to, I would say knight f6, but there's also knight b6 or rook d to e8, and no targets that white can exploit. That's the real problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Quick knight f6. I don't know if I'm missing something in general in my like chess comprehension, but these Queen's Gambit position I'm seeing with both sides castling queenside, I just don't see the point for white. Honestly, I'm not seeing what the scenario is where white comes out better.
Right.
I don't know what he's playing for. The same thing could be said about that Tomaszewski game where he was lucky to draw it in general.
Yeah, he was very lucky to draw that one. And, well, I think we just like the way Black has been playing this side of these Queen's Gambit decline positions. And, we can keep our eye on David Navara because one of the absolute best players in the world. His rating has taken a bit of a nosedive in recent months. But, of course, that doesn't mean you should count him out because he'll be back. He has been in the 2750 range for plenty of years. In the Czech Republic, they always host an elite match between him and another super grandmaster. And he's an extremely nice and generous person. And, well, he's also a polyglot. He speaks like 6 languages, David. I don't know if you knew that.
I only learned it when preparing for today. So yesterday I did not know that, or the day before.
Yeah. Well, he's a monster. We'll keep an eye on his games throughout the entire day, but so much action. I mean,
all right. Martirosyan's exchange sack. Let's have a look at that.
Who is he playing against?
He's playing against Peter Prohaska, tactical player 92.
Okay, well, that's evidencing the type of chess that he likes, tactical player 92. And wait, what is this, by the way?
It's a Benoni. A Benoni with a pawn on f6 and like a rook getting sacked. I mean, White's dark squares won't be that much of a problem if the black bishop is blocked by an f6 pawn. My first instinct is this is a disaster, not a sacrifice.
I completely agree because why can't I just scoop? I don't even have to take the rook. I don't need to, but
it's not going anywhere. He can't even take back a takes b4 to fix his pawn structure because the rook on 8 is hanging.
This is really as bad as it gets. Bishop h3.
It's so bad, right?
Like put my bishop on e6, gain more space, and I'll put pawn on b3, rook to a2, rook e to a1 if need be, and go after the a5 pawn. What is this?
Oh, the Benoni. The Benoni. It just lets me down every time.
It's just, I mean, I really don't like the Benoni. I think the structure that underlies the position is just terrible for black. And this is as bad as it gets because you've not only had the bad structure, you've also lost an exchange along the way. This is, no. Hike Martirosyan, we see him on screen. He doesn't look very pleased, and he shouldn't be pleased with how this game has started out. So he's Peter Prohaska playing for the Hungry Hunters. I mean, he also, I believe, goes to Webster University. So he's a student there on their chess
stranger
team.
to team play.
Right. And, well, he is kind of making short work of Hike Martirosyan, who's a very experienced player in this pro chess league.
Yeah, and Martirosyan, I mean, he's also like a pretty young guy. He doesn't look as young. So, like, I didn't realize last year that he was like a teenager. But I think he just turned 20. I think he's 20 now. So, he's young yet experienced. He, along with Shant, are the two Eagles who are over 3,000 in blitz. So I was kind of, I was saying the question was Zaven because I was assuming that Martirosyan would be amazing. I was assuming it. And so far, it's
a big question.
It's amazing how fast somebody rated 3,000 can lose a game.
Yeah, his Chess.com rating is in the 3,000s, one of the best players on the site. But unfortunately for him, this is not the best site that he could get.
A5 pawn 2.
Yeah, just down an exchange, not losing a pawn. Okay, we can move on from here.
This is done and dusted, right? You don't even need to keep track of it anymore.
Yep, and let's get away from this because
so Navara's got a piece sack. Somehow Shant has a knight.
Yep. And Navara's counting on a but how did this happen? Let's go back a bit because the queens were traded on g6, and after g5, knight h7, rook e5 was played, and he took it. So perhaps taking on e5 was where the mistake happened, or maybe his position's already getting into some trouble here because this knight on h7 doesn't look very happy. But after the capture, there's
the king's got a long way to go to get out of a8. So rook h1, and what's the point on knight g5? Does he go back to g1 and you can't get out of the pin, or does he have something worse?
Nope. He learned from Dobrov. Just a simple pin here, and the next move will be knight e2 and knight f4, and that knight is trapped.
Like, seems the move black wants to play is knight g5, but he's like, no, play it right now when I can tie you up. So he just sacks the knight to eliminate the pawns. And what do you think are the chances of winning this endgame for white?
Well, I have experienced losing to David Navara in the Reykjavik Open many, many years ago, where I had, I think, rook and 3 pawns, and he had rook, knight, and 2 pawns. So there's an extra pawn here for David, and he's the side trying to defend. But I think the knight, it doesn't quite have the access points it needs, because black can play b6 if necessary. But for the moment, he keeps saying rook e1, rook e2 check to say, well, your king needs to stay protecting this pawn on a2. And if you go up to a, so he's going to the center maybe with king d3 and just trying to bring the knight to c5.
Well, you can't win if you give up the a pawn too, can you?
I wouldn't rate his chances very highly, but it might be what he's doing, because otherwise isn't he just repeating moves?
I'm really not like a font of technical knowledge, but I feel like at some point I studied an endgame of rook, knight, and 2 against rook and 3. So if black didn't have the d5 pawn and his c6 pawn were back at c7, that is an endgame that I studied. I mean, not with back rank mate in 1, you know, but
yeah.
but you know, the a or the b pawn up a square. I studied that a bit, and it seemed like with great difficulty white could win it. So well, now without the a pawn, I'm going to say it's a draw. What?
Why did he give up this pawn and then just play king to b1?
In order to trap his own king on the first rank. I don't know.
He clearly wants the rook off the a file. So there's something about the rook on the a file that makes knight c5 not as strong, I guess. But he's going to play knight c5 next move. So the rook will move to say, I don't know, let's go rook h, rook e2. He played knight c5, immediately lands on the board, and b6. Okay, we'll see all this happen. But after king a8, he might go knight b4 and try to start getting some of these pawns. And what black really can't afford is to have the king stuck on the last rank, because
so
that's
he's got to get off the
checkmate.
back rank at some point.
That's what I'm anticipating. But here, rook c7. So what happens if king b8 forcing, if king b8, rook takes c6, can black take on c6 and try to draw king and 3 pawns against knight and 1 pawn? I think that that's not a good look for the side with just the pawns, because you don't have a way to force off the pawns too quickly, but sometimes you have to get desperate. And he
my goodness.
Okay.
Oh my goodness. Go quickly to Jadranka Plenka, Jadro 9 against Seth Rahman.
Knight c6 ended the game because rook a7's mate.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. I was looking at knight
here.
But I will go to that game. But he went knight c6, his rook takes a7, his mate. So he went knight b4, and you had to go king b8, and a resignation has occurred. And I just want to go back to that moment here.
Yeah.
I was saying king b8 because of a transition into a rookless endgame. He played c5, allowing the knight into c6, and you can't stop rook takes a7 mate without giving up your knight on c6. Wow.
Well, that's almost like a new candidate for blunder of the week, because knight c6. I mean, everybody knows a knight and a rook.
Yep.
Right.
Yep, that's a problem. But let's go over to the Seth Rahman game, because you were calling for it, and it looks fascinating to me. There's a king on h6, 8 seconds, 7 seconds for black, and black is up in exchange with some passed queenside pawns. But this pawn on f6, can you push to f7 right now?
He could also play queen takes rook. It's like a candidate move as well.
Oh, that's just a rook hanging.
Yeah, he's got 5 minutes to work with. This guy's one of the Bulldogs, man. Oh, he's going for a mate.
It's
queen
mate.
5. That's got to be mate, right? I mean.
So king has to go to g or h4, and he won on time. So who needs mate when your opponent loses? Wow.
Oh my God, the Bulldogs. The Bulldogs. I can't believe this.
The Bulldogs are here, and they're trying to be here to stay. They are serious. They've got some bark and some bite, apparently, and the Bulldogs continue to impress after just qualifying for the league. And we have Bulldog 167 playing, so I assume that it's one of the Bulldogs. And it's Leon Levaich playing against Arvind. And
all right. Okay, Arvind's on my fantasy team. How's he doing?
He's going to remain up a pawn.
Remain up a pawn.
So what about just queen takes b5? How's that endgame looking? You probably have to keep the queens on the board if any chance of winning. So queen c3 check, I think should be the move, because if rook e7, I take you on c4 and play rook to b4, and then we can just shake hands, rook n4 against rook n4. And even if you win my c pawn eventually for white, rook n4 versus rook on 3, same side of the board, will be a draw.
Ooh, good thing he didn't defend his e7 pawn with king f8 there.
Yeah, that's you protect the pawn, but you don't protect against the mate. That's
so now queen b3, rook e8. I've had that like 1,000 times in Puzzle Rush lately.
Yep.
I think everybody who's on chess.com now knows not to play queen takes b3, right? I mean, that's just not a thing anymore. Everybody knows about it.
Yeah, they should at least. They should, do their puzzle rush, study their tactics. And rook d8 was played, saying, okay, maybe I'll get into an attack, but I like this move queen f3 a lot. Going for the f7 pawn, keeping b3 defended. Black has
and not allowing rook d1, queen f1, super important.
Yep. I'll just show that real quick. The threat was rook d1 check, which forces king to g2, which then allows queen f1 check. And that white king, you might not get mated right away, but the queen on c3 will probably be lost. So, he decides to transfer that queen over. And black is very defensive here. And even if you get c4 and we get a queenside exchange of pawns, it's still very tough for black just because it's hard to move. So eventually white will play e5, threaten to play e6, maybe put this queen on f6. So black's task is... I'm not envious of the task.
Yeah, let's see.
I'm not into this position. We have results just coming in here. Pragnananda beat international master Lei, so that's a good win for the India Yogis. And in this match here for Arvind, he's trying to add to the score, but we did see one of the Bulldogs win an upset victory where Setu Rahman lost that game, and it's going to be a fascinating battle between these two teams.
Yeah, the other one has the Beast, Fireheart 92, playing black against I am Sven Tika.
Mm-hmm.
And looks like he's going to try and roll these pawns real fast without any king activity. His knight's going to try and fight alone, but the pawns are going to start to roll. There's a tempo.
So what about, is king e4 going to work out for black?
Knight f2 check. Knight f2.
Knight f2. Check him.
Knight f2. GG.
And then win the bishop. Oh, he found it.
I'm not shocked that Adiban found that.
Yeah, he is the Beast. That is his nickname, and he won by resignation. The reason why king e4 looks so good is because if you can start forcing trades off with like a c takes d4, king takes d3, then after d3, king e3, my king just comes right for your b pawn, and it's just 3-on-2 on the other side of the board. But
he must have counted on it when he played bishop d4, allowing that c5 tempo, but he was planning king e4, didn't really double check it.
Yep, and you only need one check to win a minor piece, and knight f2 check wins that piece. You can't bring the king to attack this knight, so next move is c takes d4, and black is up a piece. So a nice win there at the end for Adiban.
I have a position you may not believe between Tigran Petrosian and Promin 1999. You may have thought that Benjamin Gledura would never get past the third rank this game.
Whoa. And there's a knight that's just on a journey. That knight's going to e8, and it's going to d6. That's what it looks like. But also, how did this happen? Wasn't
Gledura was down a pawn last time you saw this, and in a position so bad that you would have thought it was worse than being down a pawn.
What is happening? How did this? We'll look later, I guess. But right now we're in a situation where black has a pawn up. This pin on the rook on d2. It's a trade being offered. The b4 pawn feels vulnerable.
Maybe Tigran slid off his couch.
Maybe, because this all of a sudden looks like Benjamin Gledura. And okay, 10 seconds left. Wait, rook takes h2. You're going to move the knight. This a pawn is quite good. That's the good news for white. The bad news is the d3 pawn might not leave the board anytime soon. So knight d4, presumably.
Yeah, then bishop a6 will sort of blockade and cover the pawn with the idea of rook e2. Yeah,
bishop a6 looks perfect. So I think white needs to go, knight e4 to c5. Try to kick this bishop off.
That's not strong enough, I don't think.
Yeah, it feels like you're playing to... You'll be very fortunate to hold. And we see Benjamin Gledura on screen here. He has got the headband going on. I think he's playing...
Seconds left over time.
How does somebody like Tigran Petrosian lose on time? He's such a good blitz player.
I don't know. Gledura makes the comeback. I mean, that was like one of the worst openings I've ever seen somebody win with. I mean,
this position looked horrendous at this point in time on move 15, where black is down a pawn, white is very active, can go c6 to get rid of your double. I mean, honestly, I thought this game would just be a rollover, but well, sadly for Armenian Eagles fans, it ends up being a victory for the Hunters. So we have some other games in progress. The game between Zavin and Andriasian is an end game against Gergely Tal. Gergely Tal used to live and play in the United States. He was a student at Texas Tech University.
Yeah.
And he's from Hungary and playing for his native team.
And playing for his native team, yeah.
They're repeating moves. I would play on if I'm white because I have a passed a pawn that's very far advanced. Even material, but quality of pieces that, they've, I guess, just repeated a million times. But
they just repeated. And that's where like a couple games are going. I mean, if you look at Aravind versus Leon Livac, it's also like a rook endgame where there's been some back and forth.
Yep. So we have this one looking pretty equal. Do we have any other? A bunch of end games is what we're getting today, but this game actually looks good for.
We're down to the grinds. There's rook f8, and I think Emirates Hand might be managing to win one of these end games.
Which
Emra Jan maybe. Tired of dancing.
Wow, there it is. Whoa, wait. Against Mustafa Ilmaz? I see it's
sorry. Mirman. I gave you the wrong name. Sorry. Mirman.
No, you're fine. Well, white is up 2 pawns.
Yeah, the key was this thing. He maneuvered his rook to f8. That was how he, like, this endgame is not an endgame that you could necessarily expect to win, but he maneuvered his rook to f8 and won the pawn on f7 because the black king got stuck on h7 for a bit.
And there are double pawn haters out there, but the pawn h5 helped keep the king away from the g6 square. And now e6 check is a big threat. Even rook e1 doesn't stop it because I could have played e6 anyway. But he's refraining from playing e6. He might want his king on e6. So that's actually really nice. Rook d7. Check allows the king into e or g6. But king e6.
Now it's time to go. Now he's threatening rook d8, putting the king back in his box, right? And
Rook e8 is a possibility here. Or rook d7 as well. Just rook d5. That's classy. Just bring the rook to e5.
He can just do it. He can just do it. It's over. Rolling.
Yep. Wow. Nice
game.
Nice technique there by
Merman.
Merman. So he did well for them, beating Evgeny Posty, who's a very solid player for the Israeli counselors. And we have just a couple games left.
1 second for Royce.
1 second.
Oh, could we get 2 knights against a pawn?
Oh my gosh, that's what we're gonna get, isn't it?
It sort of felt like it.
So after king e3, play king c4. Bring your king back, friend. Oh no, he's taking on e2, and that's it.
Well, that's it. We're not going to get to watch 50 moves of 2 knights versus a pawn. So all we've got left is Chitam Baram trying to grind 1 extra half point out for my fantasy team. But looks like a pretty solid defensive setup for Leon Livac, the IM.
Yep. Just keeping the king honest, or the king has to stay attached to the f pawn, and rook e4 here says, well, your pawn's not going anywhere.
He knows what he's doing. He knows what he's doing.
Don't need to teach him anything about endgames. He's doing it well. And f5 played. All right, but these type of positions scare you. 5 seconds left. So rook a7, king f6, and then you have to play rook c6 check. Oh, but now king g7. And then rook c5.
Well, also after e6, wouldn't you be losing? Rook c6, e6?
Yep, fair point as well. He actually just lost some time, but it's already a losing position.
What? Ouch. How did he lose that, Robert? It seemed like he knew everything he was doing.
It seemed like he had this in the bag. And after king e7, rook a6, rook c4 was played. And I think rook c4 is the culprit because in a position like this, you want to put your rook on b1 and start giving this king checks so it can't get into the f6 square. And if you look at the difference in the game, what he did was here, he left his rook on c4. And after f5, the problem is now my king is getting to f6 after rook a7 check. So here he should have went rook c7 back. But the big issue is that after now f6 check, if you go king d7, my king can approach via h6 and g7. So I'm still getting to your pawn, whether you like it. And, well, you're not going to like it. So in comes the king.
Yeah, definitely not going to like that. I agree. White could also play e6 check, f takes e6, king g6, and probably win that way too there.
Yep, bring the king and the pawn up. That looks actually, f7 right away. It might also be winning, but It's too many options to win this game. So he brought his rook to keeping the king to the pawn on f4. But now that I look at it a little more clearly, after rook a6, you have to go rook b1 so you can give a check from behind if you ever play f5. So that's unfortunately was the losing plan for Levac. And we were praising his play because he was being very resourceful and his defensive task was great. But David, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we will get into the second round of action here in the opening week of the Eastern Division, the 2020 Pro Chess League. And we are back with our coverage of the 2020 Pro Chess League. Thank you to everybody who's tuning in, whether that be on Chess.com TV, Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, you name it. I'm glad you're here. But speaking of names, the Beast. He might have the best nickname in chess, David. Adiban is a beast.
Yeah. I mean, I considered, changing the name of the California team to the Beasts. So I am definitely a fan of that name.
Well, then maybe you'll have to, steal him from the India Yogis. But we also have David Navara, who is one of the best chess players in the world. And he's the polyglot. As mentioned earlier, he speaks about 6 languages, if I'm not mistaken. So David, a super friendly guy. He and I played a long time ago, as I mentioned. He beat me. And, just really all around great guy in the world of chess. He's playing for the Hungry Hunters. So a nice free agent pickup for them.
Yeah, they each started off with some pretty simple tactics deciding their games. Adiban, it was knight f2 check, avoiding a piece trade and just winning a piece in the end game. And for Navara, unfortunately, was allowing knight c6 with a rook on c7 and then just a little checkmate on his king. So they started off in opposite directions. And so far, it's the Beast who's trying to score 4-0, as he has done at least once previously in last year's Pro Chess League. He definitely has that advantage of having a whole season of experience under his belt.
Yeah. And that experience generally is huge for players in this league. And we saw Tomaszewski, a fantastic player, lose his first game as well. So some of these top guys, they are not invincible. They're prone to defeat every now and then. And, well, we do have liftoff here. And I'm just, looking at the scores, the Turkey Knights, we didn't actually focus on Turkey's matchup pretty much at all. We had that one end game where we saw Postny go down to Emre and the Turkey Knights are led by Alex Ipatov, who goes to St. Louis University. He's a former world junior champion. He used to be in the 2650s. I think his rating has taken a bit of a hit, but he performed very well in the Pan American Intercollegiate event where he beat Alexander Lenderman in the final round. So clearly he's still a great chess player for those Turkey Knights.
He's 26-30 right now, but that rook and 4 versus rook and 3 that we saw won in very classic, technical style, that was the deciding game in that first round. That's what gave the team, the Turkish team, a 2.5, 1.5 lead. So we caught the only decisive game, at least from that round. And it's a super balanced matchup all around between those two teams. So I would not be surprised to see some more draws. Lots of technical players on the Israeli team. So we could see a lot of 3-draw, 1-win kind of rounds, and it's going to be close. Really, really a toss-up match to me as far as predicting. I don't know if you think there was a favorite in that match.
No, it was total toss-up to me as well. And I'm also looking now at this board that we have here between David Navara and Tigran Petrosian, as we have Navara on screen. And honestly, I don't think this is a very good choice to play against someone like David Navara. These sort of, Pirtz defenses, I play them a ton in blitz chess here on Chess.com, but in rapid chess, it's a big difference. When your opponent has 10 minutes to figure out how am I going to punish my opponent for taking an approach that hands white just so much vital space on this chessboard. And, playing h6, if you want to play g5, you run the risk of exposing your king side. White still has good control of the position. And look how quickly Navara's playing, and look how relatively slowly Petrosian's playing, despite the fact that he chose this offbeat line to try to give him some play.
If I'm Tigran Petrosian, I'm thinking, I just lost the best position I'm going to get all day.
Yes.
Where is the day going to go from here? And honestly, it would be very hard for me to fight through the next 3 rounds off of that. What would you do from here as black, right? I mean, you don't like his opening choice. Like what's Tigran supposed to do next with his day?
Yeah, it didn't get any easier. It's one of the struggles when you're playing these, back-to-back matches. You lose a game, and then all of a sudden you're playing David Navara. But I mean, I just think that time trouble is not going to be his friend, and he is a great player. But White's plans in these type of positions are generally quite straightforward. You play h3, you play queen d2, you can play a5 if you want to expand more on the queen side, or just go rook to d1, rook to e1 type of things. And black at some point will likely try to push one of his pawns, but look how little space he has. His bishop on c8 is terrible.
I feel like you're telling me all the good stuff David Navara can do. If I'm Tigran Petrosian, how am I supposed to shake this off?
I got nothing for you.
Nothing for me? Just tilt, just keep sliding down.
I think you might have to admit that this knight g4 idea is probably not ideal and end up retreating this knight to f6. Maybe like a move like queen c7. Try to, can't play queen c7. Your pawn on e7 is hanging. Great. So let's not play queen c7. Let's play knight. I don't want to play knight back to f6, but let's say I play knight to f6. Eventually, my plan, I'm letting you know my plan, is play e5, queen c7, maybe rook to e8, knight to f8. If you give me all of these moves, then I'm happy, but you're not going to. I know that, and I know that white's going to play queen d2, rook d1, etc.
I'm trying to play like a delayed Philidor, and you're saying I'm not even going to get it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It feels like white's plan is just very simple. And the one thing I wouldn't do if I was David Navara, and that Tigran actually can benefit from, is if you play an e5, e6 type of maneuver. So let's say h3, knight gf6, e5, and then try to play e6. Now, sometimes these e6 ideas really work, but in other positions, black will then play knight f8 after an f takes e6 and say, I'm going to hold on to my extra pawn. So just to, well, I have to take on e5 because I can't even play knight h7. E takes d6. There's a pin on this darn pawn on e7. So if I take, and I don't know, knight to
h7.
I don't like it. But e6 takes. And I guess my point was that at some point a knight f8 comes. Black gets ultra defensive. Puts on the shell. Becomes a turtle. But it's not easy to crack it. So that's the one thing. I don't know. I really don't like black's position.
So you're saying in a battle between a turtle and a kraken, it's a little bit of work for the kraken.
Yes, exactly. And well, we have a hunter in this case for the Hungary team, but it doesn't feel good to have this position as black and someone who's so strong and outpacing you on the clock. But okay, we can move to other games. We have plenty of action going on here. Where should we go?
Well, I was curious what you thought of the pawn on h6 that Chopper 1905 rushed up the board in sort of a very modern style English opening. I've seen this kind of like H pawn rush once or twice before, but not enough times to really form my own opinion on whether I like it or not.
Okay. And it's one of those things where you sort of like the aesthetic because it's bishops on h8, but you hate the end game. Because anytime you get into an end game with a pawn on h6, it's overextended. It's a pawn that, an eventual f6, g5, king f7 to g6, just to sort of show one of the typical plans of getting that pawn. It can backfire. But for the time being, you're like, well, I like the space that I've grabbed over there on the king side. Perhaps if I can trade dark square bishops, I can launch an attack. But the time that it took to play this, look how much development black has. All four minor pieces are developed. The king is castled into safety. And there's no clear targets to exploit. That's the downside, but I don't think that black is worried about getting checkmated anytime soon. And knight to d4, just saying, I'm going to trade some pieces. If my bishop lands on d4, I'm plenty happy about that. I think black's doing totally fine.
So that development lead, what should I use my time to do from here? Should I play c5 and sort of like try and get a Maroczy bind? Should I rush e5, f5, e4? I think when he played knight d4, he showed that he wasn't planning to rush the e and f pawns and try and explode things.
Right. He's saying, I'm going to take a slower approach. And, well, a big question for white is, when are you castling kingside? Because castling to safety now is not going to be easy to do, as the e2 pawn is under attack. So, of course, queen b3 is attempting to hit the knight on d5 and the pawn on b7. But I don't know. It feels just like an iffy strategy by Yilmaz, but he's playing so quickly that perhaps I should just believe him.
Just believe it.
And
just believe it. There's a pseudo threat of queen takes knight on top of queen takes b7.
We actually have word from, thanks to Isaac, saying, shout out to Isaac Steinkamp behind the scenes doing so much work. He says that Michalewski was following the line between Tomaszewski and Navara from 2015, which Tomaszewski won with white. But in that game, he played queen to a4 rather than queen to b3. So queen to b3 is a novelty, but it also makes a lot of sense because, well, you're putting pressure. And c6 played by Michalewski. And Michalewski is a very good theoretician. Many Israeli grandmasters actually are well known. The best or most prominent among them is Boris Avrukh with his d4 series. So I still like black's position. I think it's totally fine, but I don't know. Perhaps I'm underestimating white's chances here.
Well, I mean, we have to wonder whether or not queen b7 might be playable here in the near future once this bishop retreats.
Yeah, that allows some kind of rook b8 stuff, but if you can start gobbling pawns, b7, c6, you might lose the b2 pawn, but that's not the biggest deal in the world. I agree with you.
No, because it'll trade your undeveloped bishop on c1, right? And if you've taken b7 and c6, you could still be up a pawn. You could still have queen takes knight to go straight to an endgame, which is a great thing to do when you're up a pawn. Highly recommend that to everybody out there.
I guess the issue is, after rook b8, you can't take on c6 because knight b4 is a pretty nasty fork option. And that's what the big problem with having your king in the center for so long.
Yeah, so also, knight b4 is the key there.
Yilmaz is walking around his place right now. He just walked through the dark, and now he's in the light again. So we had a draw in a game I just saw finish. I don't even know who was playing, but there was a result between Michael Ruiz and Alexander Ipatov. So Ipatov, the board won for the knights. Solid position here. And these are the type of positions where I hate draw offers. I mean, in general,
continuing to go for a PCL record for most draws in a match for this Turkey-Israel matchup.
Yeah, it's just there's still life left in this position, but the players, I guess, had enough. And it's not easy to see a break. That's the issue, because this 95 looks great, but I could play 97 to trade it off or just keep the tension alive. And f4 is always a very risky move to play, opening up the king side and the e-file and its pawn e4. So, okay, perhaps shouldn't be overly critical, but I wish they played it on.
All right. How about Fridman versus Jan? Fridman is Tormaz. And early in this game, I really liked his position. That's, again, my sort of anti-King's Indian defense kind of structure bias. I felt like white was opening up the queen side too fast, and black was going to be in huge trouble. And now looking at it, it seems like black is kind of getting there on the king side as well. So it's looking more controversial to me now.
Yeah, I look at this position, I look at the b7 pawn, the d6 pawn, and I hate black's position. But you have a point that there is some activity being gained by black. And for example, this queen coming to c5 at the right moment, hits f2, hits this rook on b6, could be problematic. And, well, it begs the question, why didn't he take on g3 last move? Because typically you want to play h takes g3. But h g3, there's queen c5, and that forces queen e3 just to defend the h2 pawn and the rook on b6. And it's still a good endgame for white, thanks to the pressure on two different pawns. But it just goes to show that black can have some concrete threats of his own at some point soon.
Yeah, I guess putting the knight on h4 was pretty clever by Fridman, because it keeps that e7 knight kind of stuck there and occupies a bunch of space on the king side. So it makes it a lot harder for black to get a full attack going.
Right.
And now he goes queen b3, presumably.
Yeah, he was trying to get that.
Might want to go to
pawn.
b4 at some point, but there is knight c8. But anytime he can get that knight to budge, then he'll be threatening knight f5, right? So queen b4, knight c8, rook b5, and he's saying hey, I want to play knight f5 next. I also want to play c5 next. How are you going to cover all that?
Yeah, I guess b6 at the end of that might almost trap this rook in on b5, funnily enough. And then this rook on b8 is not free to move, hopefully, to the a file.
With the idea of knight f5, knight a7.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind trapping your rook on b5, but also rook a8, trying to go to a1 feels like a plan. I think ultimately what this position and our evaluation of it comes down to is white is the one with actual threats here, with this target on b7, tying the rook down. d6, maybe not so easy to get to, but eventually that will be an issue. And also the quality of the bishops. Right? The bishop on f1 doesn't look so good, right? But I can play c5 at some moment to break open that.
I mean, he can play c5 at any moment. I was even thinking of it last move when he played bishop f1, that it was already possible, because if d takes c5, there's d6. And if queen takes c5, then you can play rook b7. So it's a move which he can easily play if he wants to.
Right. And this pawn on g4 is actually a potential weakness rather than a strength, because if that queen on b3, say, gets to a square like d7, and then is attacking this pawn on g4, and this bishop f1, bishop f6, at some moment, you're looking at knight g2 hitting the f4 pawn. And this bishop on g5, okay, it's fine. It's defensive. But I'm also wondering, can I just take on f4 and then play an e5 push? He played rook to b5 very quickly.
Okay, it looks like he's going for c5, right? He wants to play c5 and not allow queen c5, rook b7. So he doesn't want to trade those pawns. He wants to have some pawn left to work with on the queen side.
Mm-hmm. I honestly like just taking on f4 and playing e5 though, because you can't take on e5 as white plays d6. So it feels like that was just kind of the brute force method of just push the pawns through.
It's exploding. It's exploding.
And he played f3 on h5, saying, "Well, David says it's exploding, but I'm going to keep everything together."
It's like I just want to hold it, you know. But I mean, in my experience, when you got 4 pawns all in contact like that, something explodes.
Yep, and bishop e2 might be the way to make it explode, right? Because now you're actually forcing black to do something about this g4 pawn, and
I like that.
Just feels like a natural move just to get out. And actually, the good thing about rook b5 is there's no queen c5. That's a very important point, because if he'd played f3 and moved earlier, instead of rook b5, or a couple moves earlier, I should say, then there's like queen c5 check, queen f2, and that's a big issue for this white king. So rook to b5 says the queen is not activating itself, and now he can try to break open the king side, as you pointed out. So he took on f4. He flinched first. And what's his follow-up? Queen b2 check. I don't know. Something about this feels weird, though, because if that knight goes to g6 and e5, white might be in trouble soon. So knight g6 here. Played. I don't know, David. I'm liking black's position more than I did before.
It's such a mess. It's sort of like changing from you move by move. But knight takes f4 seems playable.
He's going to play queen e7, I think, and just try to take over the g4 is hanging.
Rook f8, I think, to defend g4 with this bishop d4 idea. Yep.
Yeah, that's better.
Okay, so now what does one do? King h1 is possible. There's a lot of stuff hanging on the f file. The problem is if you play like queen e3 or something, if you move the queen, then black can play g takes f3. And you can't take it back. And then that f pawn, I don't think your king position can tolerate that f pawn very well.
So what can you do? I mean, this e5. Oh my God, I love moves like that. Where you close off the diagonal and a bishop e5, queen g5 check. Then you pick up the h5 pawn with check.
Then pick up the g4 pawn, and then he's laughing. I mean, then he's honestly just chuckling to himself.
Candidate, if this works out for him, candidate for move of the week. I love moves like that, just like clogging a square, clogging a diagonal. D takes e5. Now you have this passed d pawn that you're going to try to
and you've blocked in that bishop, right? So you go queen e4, you're threatening bishop d3. Suddenly it's the contrast between the two opposite colored bishops, right? Your queen's also on this rook b7 move. So that feels pretty good. What comes next? Is it bishop d3?
Let's see. So, bishop d3 looks like it's getting on the verge of a knockout. Because
or is it better to just play c5 first? You just emphasize that piece over there.
I like bishop. Okay, he went d6 right away. So what's he seeing here after queen?
Nice long thought. D6? So he was calculating something with rook b7, rook f7.
Wait, but
what did he calculate?
Wait, but this can't even be close to better for white anymore. Just looks
just dead. Drawage.
Right.
Equalish.
So what did we miss something?
Well, that wasn't awesome.
Wait, what just happened?
Awesome enough.
Why did he play d6 and not bishop d3? I loved your bishop d3 move. I mean, you're just going for a mate over here.
Well, looks like he's just going for a draw over here.
He was worried if king h8, there's no time to play a move like d6, queen g7 check, and then the black queen infiltrates, perhaps. But
right.
I don't know. I believe in white's position there, though.
That's why after first thinking about bishop d3, I was kind of like switching to maybe c5 because I want to play d6 without stacking my d pawn. But all right, it goes on. The game is a draw. There's a game I was watching where it looked like Zavin was winning against Prohaska. Yeah, that's confirmed.
Yeah, he's up in exchange with a pass pawn and resignation. Yep.
All right, resignation. That'll do it.
Sargsyan just won his game over Benjamin Gledura. So the black pieces were no obstacle for Shant. He just pinned his bishop on c3 and won it.
Let's go, Shant.
Yeah, he's on your fantasy team, I take it?
How do you know? What tipped you off?
Because usually you're a pretty unbiased commentator. So all of a sudden when you're, actively cheering for the guy.
Actively cheering for somebody.
Yeah. There's an interesting end game now between Navara and Tigran Petrosian. And by interesting, I mean that white is up a pawn. And it kind of looks like 2 pawns at first glance, but black has these double A pawns. That said, not that easy for white to mobilize the pawns because you want to put this pawn from E4 back to E3. Like that would be the best move.
You do.
Not getting away with that.
But my friend Sam wrote a whole book about how you can't move pawns backwards. So there you go.
How about knight C6 here? Knight C6, knight B4, trying to take the A pawn and deliver a checkmate on
It's like, I'm looking at your A pawn, man. No, let's focus on your A pawn.
Right. Come on, man. Just move that thing, and then you get mated. But yeah, the point is that knight on D3 would actually be an excellent square for it. So knight C6 has a ton of merit to start with here. But okay, so I see that Haik Martirosyan won his game against Gergely Antal, and where'd that queen go?
So the Hunters were up 2.5, 1.5 after the first round, but it feels like the Eagles are coming back this time.
David, look at the end of the game as you Haik Martirosyan. Speaking of blunder of the week, queen D3 check, and queen took on D3.
No. Oh my God.
He just put his queen on a hanging square.
He had basically saved the game.
Yeah,
he'd been in trouble like all game.
And he still is in a tough position because the A pawn is a passer, but you're absolutely right that like he's fought so valiantly to get to this point, and then he plays queen D3 check, and just his queen has lost in one move.
Wei's off the hook now. F6 has got nothing on this.
Yeah, definitely not.
Oh man. Okay. So
Tigran is now down another pawn. So we can probably we'll keep an eye on this game, but we should go to some of the other games because he's down many, many pawns, and at some point soon it looks like white will be able to push F4. So knight D4, for instance. Actually, can he almost go king E5 here? It's like trading the knights.
Okay, my favorite game right now is Postny against Solak. Evgeny 81. Okay. That's my favorite right now. I've got like a spot for queen and rook against queen and rook sort of end games. I'm not totally comfortable calling them end games because they like always end with checkmating attacks.
Yep.
Whoa. Ooh. All right. I think he's going for a draw. I don't think he's trying to win with that.
And let's see. I think he's found himself a draw. The king has nowhere to escape to. You just keep going queen E2, queen E1. If the king goes to G3 and then tries to F3.
Keep doing the same thing, huh?
Yep.
Oh, he did it. That was clutch. He needed all his time to find that. King
G4, F5 check. So thankfully you have the F pawn because otherwise that king is getting out. There's still queen E2 check, I guess. Man.
Still queen E2.
That one's close.
He did it. He had like 10 seconds left when he like finished double checking his variations.
Do you want to know something interesting about Solak as a player?
Always.
He loves knights. So most GMs, they love having the 2 bishops. Solak, if you look through his games, he loves playing at the white side of an exchange Spanish, where he'll take on C6 every time. He loves his knights.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Comes in handy in Bullet, I hear.
True. Those knights can, make many forks when you're not expecting them. And by the way, Aravind, I believe he's on your fantasy team.
Yeah, I know.
He just went down in, he just got checkmated here against.
Yeah, I had my eye on that. It was like, there was just always, it's an example of how opposite colored bishops are sometimes not drawish. There was just this pressure on F7 this whole time. And I guess finally he blundered with bishop D4.
Yeah, the queen can't go anywhere to protect his pawn on
F7.
F7.
F3, oops.
And it's funny because most here would, if you just told them the positions and said the pieces to them, didn't show them on the board, say, wait, that should be a draw. It's bishops of opposite color, even number of pawns, but the rook activity, the rook on F8 is a defensive passive piece. The rook on F3 is an aggressive piece while also defending the F2 pawn, and that's why he was able to win. But we still have
Ilmaz Mikhailevsky.
Yep, I just saw that. Okay, this rook cannot be captured.
There's mate in one, lots of mate in ones here.
What is that? Rook queen C6, queen A8?
King back to H2. There's still nowhere to get out of these mates, right?
No, sir. So you can take this.
That pawn on H6 won the game like 30 moves later, 40 moves later.
Hey, we said, if there is an attack on the dark square, something like that, it could be a problem for black. But in endgame, it would have been an eyesore for white. But
Okay, look at this move 41. That was pretty sweet.
Move 41?
Yeah.
Oh, I love moves like that.
That's how we got the party started. This, again, we've got like a pair of these light squared versus dark squared games. And this one, it looked like black structure would be okay, right? Like with the E6 pawn, you would think that this one would be more easy to draw than the one where F7 was exposed. And yet he still broke through.
Yeah, that move bishop e6 is so nice, saying the queen is overloaded. After queen c7, you can't take on h6 without losing your rook on d8 check. You rook d1 check. It makes it seem like you saved your rook. And after king to say g2, now I can take on h6, but you've left your back rank exposed. So rook b8 check, and there's no way to escape. You have to sacrifice your queen, and at the end of it, your bishop falls and
pick up the bishop, and then you don't have to worry about the technique.
Exactly. So,
and I never like to worry about the technique, Robert. I like to knock them out. I like to have, at least like 3 points of cushion when I go to win my end games.
I mean, that's reasonable. You don't want to have to deal with the minutia, but the Turkey Knights doing very well here against the Israel Counselors. We are halfway done with the Eastern Division opening matchups. We will return in just a couple minutes for the third round of action. Well, today we're covering the Pro Chess League, but nobody should forget about the Puzzle Battle World Championship. The semifinals take place Saturday, January 11th, as you see on the graphic in front of you. Dimitrios Greek Gift Lidopoulos takes on Hans Demon Neiman. And then in the other semifinal matchup, we have Ray Robson and Christopher Yu. I need nicknames for them. David, if you have any, feel free to give them.
It's exciting because I saw Chris Yu and Neiman. They were paired. So they went head to head during the qualifier, a couple of weeks ago. And they busted through and qualified ahead of a field full of 2,600 plus GMs, famous guys. And to see them make it all the way now to the semifinals past players like, Nakamura, it's crazy to see them there. They're going to have to earn some nicknames.
Yeah, I I don't know what to give them, so I'm just drawing blanks for now. But really impressive performances by those 4 players. They've earned their spot in the semis. And, well, we have the Pro Chess League underway. Hans Niemann, I believe, is in the Norway Gnomes, if I'm not mistaken.
You're correct.
Right, so he is in the Pro Chess League. Christopher Yu, I don't know if he is. Of course, Ray Robson playing for the Chicago Wind. But it's good to see these players solving puzzles at high level, but also competing in these team events.
Yeah. All around good players. The youngsters aren't yet as accomplished as Ray, but they certainly could get there in a couple of years.
Yep. And Ray, well, speaking of accomplished, his performance for the Chicago Wind was exemplary yesterday. Oh, sorry, not yesterday, 2 days ago. I lose track of my commentary days, but he played very well for them in their opening matchup. They got a big win over the Capybaras.
Yeah.
And
yeah. The biggest story to me, well, I see 2 big stories developing here so far. One's more exciting than the other. I see the Bulldogs only 1 point down on the India Yogis, who are one of the preseason favorites for this Eastern Division, in my opinion. And that's amazing. I don't know how they scored their points, but I'm gonna have to really keep my eyes on them to keep track of that. And the other is the Israel-Turkey match, which I think is on its way to setting a draw record. So keep my eye on that as well.
The team from Israel has yet to score a victory. The Turkish team playing very well, led by the likes of Mustafa Yilmaz and Emre Can, and of course, Alex Ipatov. So very tough team from Turkey. As we said to start the show, it's a relatively even matchup between those teams, at least on paper. But we're also using the classical ratings when we're determining, the rating average. So it can be a bit misleading because some players are just really not as strong in the quicker time controls. It makes sense, right?
Yeah. I was really impressed by Yilmaz's game this last round that we looked at the very end of the round with the bishop takes e6, cracking through with the opposite colored bishops. So we've definitely seen the winning side of opposite colored bishops today, as opposed to the drawing side. And we'll see what they do next. But for now, the Turkish team is starting to build a bit of a lead. I think I flipped a coin and picked Israel. So this might be one match I lose. We'll see. Still close-ish.
Hard to predict these type of matchups. Honestly, all of these matchups are still very close. And Hungary down a point against the Eagles. But if David Navara can outplay Haik Martirosyan in this game with the black pieces. And I also love that David's handle on Chess.com is former prodigy because he's still such a great player. And I think he just, taking a crack at himself, just making a little joke. But David is, like I can only say it so many times, he's such a friendly guy, a really well-respected player. And some of his preparation has been phenomenal. I don't know if you remember his king walk against Wojtaszek, where his king, he was the white pieces, his king reached the other side of the board with like queens and rooks on the board.
Yeah.
So the guy is, he's brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant guy, former prodigy. It would be, that would be like a fitting name. There's probably a whole long list of people who'd like to have that name, right? So many child prodigies who are now up there at the top of world chess like he is. We've got some current prodigies too playing today, like Pragnananda.
Okay, should we check out Pragnananda's game?
Sure. Let's see how he does against these Bulldogs.
Here we are. Pragnananda with the black. Oh, he's a player of my own heart. This is kind of a sketchy line for black, but I grew up playing it. So I know very well just how sketchy it can be.
I remember I remember that. I somehow I still know your old repertoire, but I knew that you were sort of like a delayed Steinitz player.
Yep. I'm honored that you, remember my shady openings in the past. And part of the problem is if you just look at the setup for black, you're behind in development. And this isn't even the approach that I think is most damaging, because if you just go back in time a little bit, often white can play a D5 move and then a C4 and just turn into a King's Indian type of structure where white just has much more space. In the immediate position, the E4 pawn was under attack, so you didn't want to play for C4, and he took on E5, and we'll see just one trade. And the reason why white did not trade on E5, because as soon as you trade on E5, the D pawn takes, that opens up this bishop on F8, whereas the bishop on F8 now is just kind of an ugly duckling sitting behind his pawn on D6.
Yeah, well, he better be careful because he's playing black against Yadrenko Plenka, who has 1.5 out of 2 so far against a 2,600 plus opposition. So that means his performance rating is 2,800 today. So Prague may be used to, people being scared of him because people are usually scared to play young talents, but you better be careful about Plenka himself.
He must be. This position is a little bit dry for the time being, so I'm going to move our attention elsewhere just for now. I'm looking the game between Setu Rahman and Lei, because in that game there was a sacrifice, a very vintage dragon sacrifice on the c3 square, and we see that black had to trade queens. So you typically want to get an attack. Sometimes the end game works out fine for black, but this somehow looks a bit suspicious, especially considering that Setu Rahman is playing so quickly.
I mean, he played rook takes c3 in 1 second. He clearly knew that they were going to trade queens.
Right. So, but he's also down quite a bit on the clock.
Yeah.
So he's thinking a lot here, and that's a really bad place to be, David, is when you make a sacrifice that it might be known, and then you just start going to the think tanks and you're down a rook for a knight, and that's it. And I'd be worried about this. All right, let's go to the Sean Sargsyan
He could
game.
play. Yeah, I know. That's the game I wanted to go to anyway. So I won't talk about knight takes g4. We'll go straight to Shant.
Because
knight f4. What? Bishop f4, rook b2. Sarg. So white wanted the initiative. When white played h5 and sacked the h pawn, and then comes following up with g4 and stuff, he wanted the initiative. He did not see knight f4 coming when he played g4. You do not play g4 if you know the guy is going to play knight f4. Oof.
Yeah, this is a big problem, because not only is the knight not able to be captured, knight d3 check will be very annoying, as if my c4 pawn lands on d3, you won't be a happy camper. And what does white even do here? What move can you make?
Some knight d1 type of move at the risk of seeming really lame.
Oh, knight d1. That's a hard move to play. But
I'm feeling like I'm just a target on c3, and like if knight d3 is coming in, I don't have a lot of time.
My first question was like, did you stop me from playing knight d3? The answer is yes, because you take with the queen on d3, because after pawn takes d3, bishop takes a5, and white goes up a piece. So he can
knight
play
d1.
queens.
We even stopped knight d3 check totally.
Yep.
I was accidentally as good as Peter Prohaska.
I think he'd play queen c7 and just protect his knight, and then say, what next? So we had the temporary stop of a knight d3.
But it's not just temporary. He followed up with bishop takes c4, Robert. So that was like how strong this knight d1 move was.
Okay, so he's in this position here where he's taking the c4 pawn off. So white is temporarily not up a pawn. Wait, yeah, wow. Okay, I thought white was up a pawn, but no, you're not. And
white had sacked the h pawn early on, like hoping to be the one playing with the initiative.
Right. So, I mean, look at this situation. The kings, though. This king on e1 is very much stuck here. The king side looks pretty safe for the time being. So somehow the situation is clarified, and it still looks really good for black.
I guess it still does look kind of good for black.
Yeah.
Yeah. But knight d1 must have been the best defense. I mean, this is like better than what we were first thinking white was looking at.
For sure. Knight d1 does look good indeed. And okay, we'll let these players figure it out. Is there anywhere else we want to turn our attention?
Still in the game. And if I look over here, he did play knight takes g4. All right. So go back to Tuan Minh Le. He did play the move I was thinking of. Knight takes g4.
Wow. Okay, so even without queens on the board, he goes for the sacrifice.
Right. So the idea is then you go knight takes e4. C3 is indefensible. You predict that white's going to play bishop d4. Hopefully he predicted it, because I did, and I only looked at it for 2 seconds. And then the idea is you maybe play knight takes c3 check, and bishop takes, rook takes, and you play this endgame with just a rook against a few pawns. Normally white would have lost the h pawn, so you'd have one more pawn to play the full rook down version.
I don't believe in this, David. I know that, it's exciting stuff, but I think that, so he took on d4, which makes sense.
Yeah.
Right?
So in this position, he has to go this way, I guess. So now if the rook takes, he's got knight c3, knight takes e2.
But then I have I don't have rook e4 because you have bishop c6.
Yeah.
Oh, that's sick, because if you don't have bishop c6, I play rook e4, I win your e7 pawn, and okay, maybe black is still doing fine, but it feels like at least I'm taking one of your important pawns away.
Right.
But bishop c6, that is ouch town.
Yeah, so I think he's got to take with the knight here to try and defend the bishop, although then there's also knight c3 check, king moves e5.
Yep.
What do you think of this? Down a rook in the endgame. That's pretty sick.
I think he's finding his way here, because black has so many pawns. And I mean, I guess I just believe Setu Rahman. When he's moving that quickly, he's a very strong grandmaster. I was just trusting him, and I don't know every single detail of his very sharp dragon theory, but maybe I shouldn't trust him anymore. I think he needs to earn it back. He's out of the circle.
He's lost your trust. Got to earn it again. Yeah, because it feels like this is going to be good for black, or acceptable.
What about pawn takes d4? So if I'm going to lose my bishop on e2 anyway, or lose an exchange, I might as well take with the pawn, right?
Right. Yeah, that's true.
But you go knight c3 check, I bring my king up. You go knight takes e2.
You need something special because you're down 2 pawns.
Right. And I wanted to go rook h to e1 or go after e7 pawn.
I'll even play bishop takes g4. I'm so confident at this point.
Just leave me alone, David. You're taking all my stuff.
Sorry.
Yeah.
That's exactly what Setu Rahman is feeling right now, by the way. Only like even worse than you, because it's not really your stuff. But he's like, he must be so unhappy.
And I'm sure both players, because we have Tuan Lay on camera right now, he's probably trying to figure out hey, am I better here? You want to be objective about your valuations. And he will have a bishop and 2 pawns for the rook. And by material, that's about level. But by position, if you lose that e7 pawn, as I was mentioning earlier, that could end up hurting. So he's giving up the g pawn, hoping to win the e pawn. And I think this is a good trade if it happens for white. So I would play knight c3 to d5, actually. Just bring the pony home.
He doesn't look as confident as I would think. I mean, he looks like he's working really hard, Robert.
He is. He's trying to
Maybe I should work that hard when I've got a good position.
We all should. And he played knight to c3. And honestly, if that knight sits on d5, he brought it to the check. So he wants to protect the e-pawn. But I thought you could just do it by going knight to d5. So
yeah, it was an option. You may have something else in mind. Bishop takes g4 maybe, and then rook e7, bishop f5. Maybe he wants to keep going with the initiative. He can also play bishop e6, but then there's d5, so it's sort of another version of that. Simple stuff.
Right. So he played king f8.
Simple stuff. All right. Now let's go check out my man Cheetah.
Okay.
See if he can make up for last round for me.
Aravind. Whoa, what just happened here?
Wait. Yeah, b4 was played, and he responded by just taking on f2. And there may be like a crazy tactical sequence here.
Yeah, I mean, this queen's on c2. We've talked about this several times today. When there's a rook on c8, a queen on c2, the rook almost always wins that matchup. And he played e5 here, which says your bishop also is in trouble. You don't have the e3 square because my queen on b6. You can't go anywhere along the g5 or h6 squares. He played bishop d2, and then he might play e4, e3.
I thought last move he was going to play knight e4 instead of e5.
I thought he was going to play knight e4 as well, but perhaps he was worried about queen e4, bishop
queen e4, bishop e4.
So he's saying 3 minor pieces for the queen.
But isn't that only... Oh, because the rook's defended. Yeah.
Yeah, thankfully. Otherwise,
otherwise it's like nothing to even talk about, right?
Yep.
Bishop takes. Yeah.
Not that clear.
Okay.
I mean, I wouldn't be super confident about it, but
yeah, it's annoying to play against. It's annoying to play against in a rapid game, all those minor pieces. Okay, so e5 could make sense. So we're expecting bishop to d2, then maybe pawn to e4.
Yep, and just keep pushing that thing.
And just keep pushing that thing. Okay, so he's getting his piece back right away anyway. Knight takes e5.
Yep, I think that's the best decision that White could make here, but the position is still looking really good for Arvind, because if you look at the position, you see that the pawn structure, Black's is better. You have this isolated pawn e2, the rook on c8 still staring down this queen on c2, not a happy pin situation. And okay, queen f5 played, but There has to be some kind of simple, good move here.
No, the bulldog is at least like, fighting his way out and avoiding getting down to seconds on the clock. He's got some time to do this. So he might even be looking at like knight g6, bishop takes h6 or something.
Yeah, that's a tactic worth exploring because the G pawn is overloaded.
Just because I feel like long-term White's position is pretty bad. The king is just so loose. So I'm like, if I'm White, I'm looking for a way to shake things up.
Yeah, and I'm thinking for Black at some point, like a knight e4 tactic, or rook takes c3, then knight e4. You have those up your sleeve. So actually, maybe even after knight g6, bishop h6, there might be some kind of rook takes c3, rook c3, knight e4. Which gets your knight out of dodge and also hits the rook on c3 as well, then rook on f2. But I guess rook e3 there. And
can you play knight e4 without even sacking on c3 because the rook c1's defended still by that bishop up on h6. Yeah,
the beauty of a bishop, long range.
Beauty of a bishop does it all.
Okay, and we are getting word that Haik Martirosyan loses against David Navara. If we just go back to move 40 here, he just went knight to d3 on move 39, I should say, and then allowed queen takes d6. So probably not allowing queen takes d6 is superior.
Well, he allowed it because he was winning a piece that way, right? With knight e1.
Oh, wait, what?
That was the point. That was actually Martirosyan who took the d6 pawn and perhaps shouldn't have.
Oh my gosh, Haik. Sorry, I was looking at it as if Haik was Black for some reason. I just got the word. I'm tuning in. No, you're totally right. That was a Haik blundered himself. I guess he just totally forgot about knight d3 and. Wow, okay.
Once knight d3 hit, I don't know that he had anywhere to go with his queen to keep the bishop defended. Because even on queen e3, you don't trade and then play knight e1, king f2. You just play knight e1 first, then trade, then take. It looks like knight d3 was just was what he blundered there.
Just a straightforward finish after that, a free piece. So we're gonna go away.
One more draw in the Israeli tally.
Okay, that was Yilmaz and Friedman.
Also a draw for Pragnananda with the modern or Hess Steinitz, as it's sometimes called.
Okay, it made it out okay. You don't always make it out okay. I know from experience. So good on Pragnananda to hold this guy from the Bulldogs playing really well.
Yeah, I'm seeing the Bulldogs put up some points.
Yep.
And I don't know if
Israel's ever going to get a win, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah, and Chita had to sack a pawn, or chose to sack a pawn in the follow-up to what we saw. So after queen f5, White was able to grab the pawn over on b5, and now he's really going to rely on White's exposed king to provide him some major counterplay here. He's got the idea of knight takes bishop next, which would get him either the g3 or the h3 pawn.
Yep. But all things considered, this is pretty good for White. It looked really bad earlier, and now this is like White's up a pawn temporarily. Yeah. Sure, there's rook on c3.
Here there's queen takes e2. I was going to mention that if White played rook f3, he could play queen takes e2, and it did happen.
Okay, so you're going to go. But even this, I mean, then there's queen a8 check, take a7. So I don't think Black is particularly thrilled about how this game has gone along here.
No.
It's looking like
not thrilled.
It looks like White is holding. Wow, this guy is tough. 2396, outrated by over 200 rating points, but had a bad position, yet here he is, still fighting in this one. So the Bulldogs hanging tough.
Yeah. And then we've got Tuan Min, who's got a pretty good position, although he's managed to get down in exchange. Oh, he was down in exchange this whole time. Right. That's right. Just with sufficient pawns for it.
I mean, just put this knight on e4, I was going to say, or d5, and the light square knight play d5 next for Black. I mean, this is just a brilliant position. So
yeah,
I'm not believing Setsuron ever again. I mean, that's really what the verdict of this game is, because he was moving very quickly, and Black had sacrificed an exchange and a thought for a long period of time, and then I guess White just kind of played into not a great line. That's what it's looking like.
Yeah. Well, this is another match I called wrong because it looks like the Bulldogs are definitely going to get whatever, like 5 or 6 points they needed to make Greg's spread.
Yep.
Hopefully Seth Rahman could still draw it, except that I'm rooting for the Bulldogs, I guess. So I'm rooting against my fantasy interests just because it'd be so exciting if a team of 4 IMs could actually compete in this league.
You have to pick wonderful time for your teams in the future. That's what we're learning here.
I guess I do.
Your team, seeing your team, Sean Sargsyan won his game again.
Yep.
So he's a perfect 3-0.
So he's 3-0. As far as I know, he's the only person on 3-0 so far.
Oh, and look at the way he finished this game with a rook d1 check, picking up this knight on d6 because look how many extra pawns Black has. All 3 on the king side. Wow.
I'd just say enough. I'm not sure if I'm going to count to 3. I'm just going to say enough.
You sound like a parent, David.
Enough to win. I'm old. I'm tired. He's got it.
Yep. So let's should we take a peek at our guy, the Beast, Adiban?
Oh my goodness. Sure. I was just noticing that it looks like the Israelis are about to lose another point to the Turkish Knights. On the Emre Can is looking like he's up. Again, hard to count, but maybe also 3 pawns, just like the example you just showed me.
Wow, casual surplus of 3 pawns here. And yes, this looks like a pretty straightforward win for Jean. And well, for Israel, they haven't scored a single victory yet. And for the Turkey Knights, really impressive opening matchup for them. Their debut is one that is going to keep a lot of attention on them throughout the season.
They only really need to win 1 game per round at this rate to pull ahead. But you wanted to see the Beast. So let's see the Beast up against the Bulldog.
He just played the move pawn to e5.
Mm-hmm.
He's trying to break open the Black king, but
and it's a clearance thing, right? He wants his knight from c3 to get over to that king.
Here it comes.
Like, hurry up. Didn't you hear? We were going to attack that guy.
Well, look at this queen on b4, right? That queen on b4 earlier was on c7. But now it's stranded on b4 that's, okay, I'm attacking a b3 pawn, but my rook on f3 is perfectly situated protecting it. So, there might be some options with queen e1 check, but the Black king seems to be in a worse spot than the White king, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is looking pretty scary to me for Black. I would definitely struggle to find a defense. I'm looking at d5, knight f6 for White, and then d5 to try and get my... I don't know, to try and get my queen and rook sort of out by making a pawn trade. But after knight f6, I have to take it.
Actually, how bad is that for Black if we take on d5? Oh, the problem is queen takes f6 check. Because taking with the pawn seems like what you want to do.
Yeah.
When the king sits on h7, there's no clear mate. But if I take with the queen, then I take on d5 next move, and your rook can't take on d5 because f7's hanging.
Yep. And then I want to play e6 as well for White. That was sort of the line I was looking at. Okay, so he finally concedes, makes the trade on e5. That opens up his pieces a little bit as well for Black, but it concedes that dark square diagonal that he was worried about.
Yep. And king g2. I always like these king g2 moves. Look at 10 seconds left for Levaich. He lost that endgame because of his time mismanagement. Here, queen b8 already has the threat of knight f6 check and the pawn on b6. So I would think about playing that, or play a5 and then play c5. Just like start pushing your past pawns. Yeah. There's an extra pawn on the queen side for White. So I like Adiban's position. I like his clock management. And for the Bulldogs, this is one they need to hold if they're going to stay in this match.
Yeah, queen b8. Queen b8.
Maybe queen d8 for Black. Just get that might actually makes a lot of sense, right? Just protect b6, protect your back rank here.
Yeah, you can't give up the b pawn. That's just too big a majority for White. So,
and b4 play. He wants to play c5, 6, 5. Ooh, he got the move off queen d8, but the c pawn still roaming here. He's gonna take with the knight on c5, I guess. He can still take with the pawn, but even the knight takes is good. There it is.
The Beast is feeling it.
A6 is the target.
Ooh, that's a good move.
Yes, it is. Protecting and attacking simultaneously. Rook f5 comes next, so you have to be very careful.
King
if you're
h2?
At king h2, there might be rook to d1 at some point, freezing White's position. So knight e4. Yeah. I like that move. Rook f5. You can't take. You take on f5. The
just
pin.
Take back with either pawn. What's the move? What's the move now? And this is not easy. I mean, I'd feel more confident in the Bulldog if he had like 3 seconds instead of 1.
Yep.
But positionally, he's definitely got completely back into this game. It's just like a toss-up.
And
got the p-pawn.
Queen e7.
Oh, hello.
Queen a8. Play, okay, queen c6, same idea, going after the a6 pawn.
Yep.
But this, you can't afford to lose the a pawn.
But he couldn't really defend it, I guess. So he's going for a counterattack on the white king. Queen c5 is going to come out.
Queen a8 to f3. And from f3, you attack the f7 pawn as well. Can't play f6 is queen b7 check. So don't blunder there. Nice move, queen a7.
Also f6, knight e6. So really don't touch that f pawn under any circumstance.
Oh, look at that.
He's trying to run his a pawn down. He wants to play queen b7.
Queen b7 loses the f2 pawn. So
queen f2, yeah. So he can't do it. He gets
queen d5. That king on g8. Wait, how do you get out of this? But where? Because queen d7 comes with check.
Oh, God, yeah. I was thinking that, but queen d8 to e7.
He got it. Here comes the queen to g7 with mate. No, that was it.
That's exactly how I would have lost it too, Robert.
Oh, my gosh. Wow, what a win for the Beast and for the India Yogis. That is huge. So
I'm so impressed how close he made it. I see his strength. He needed like 2 or 3 more seconds, and he might have gotten a draw off of the Beast.
Oh, man, he was smiling, and just you clearly relieved was Adibon. If we just go back a few moves here, and I think we have all matchups done for this round, but like if we go to this position where I was saying you can't afford to give up that a pawn, and black had no time left. After queen c6, he had to move knight to c7 as an example to protect this pawn and maybe activate the knight to the d5 square. He said, well, I want my knight to g4 aggressive. But after the queen came to f3, David, it felt like, I mean, if anyone's better, it's white because it's the outside pass pawn.
He totally still had an option there, with knight c7.
Yeah, and even here, I don't think he should be lost. I mean, knight to e5, get active, protect your pawn f7. But he then got in this passive situation where he's just moving his king back and forth, and he finally plays f6, thinking, hey, I'm taking the a6 pawn, but underestimating the power of queen to d5. And David, was there a knight e3 check here? Pawn e3, queen e2 check might have been a saving grace, a quick tactic here. But I guess he just doesn't work out because my king ends up going on h2, and well, that sadly doesn't work. So he had no time, even though there are tactics possibly flying, not panning out.
That white queen was so strong on that. Once he got that long diagonal, the white queen was really strong, and that's like killing your, the knight e3 save. It's threatening the black king with checkmate.
Yeah, it's just a sad way to lose this game, a well-defended game by Leon Levaich. But right now, we are going to take our final break. When we come back, it will be the 4th and final round of action in these Pro Chess League Eastern Division debut performances. So everybody, stay right where you are. And we are back for the final round of the Eastern Division opening matchups. We have Alexander Ipatov versus Daniel Friedman, the Turkey Knights and the Israel Counselors in a close matchup. We'll see how that one unfolds. But we have the Beast. He takes on Min Lei, and Min Lei is super duper strong for the Croatia Bulldogs. And of course, we have David Navara, who just won a game over Haik Martirosyan. He takes on Zavin Andriasian of the Armenia Eagle. So David, of these three matchups, these key games that we have going forward here, which of these excites you the most?
I think I'm looking for the Beast versus Min Lei because, you know, Tuan Min just managed to convert that like really tough end game. He sacked an exchange, then he sacked a piece. In the end, all this in the end game against Sethu Rahman, super strong player. And it's going to be a question. Can the Beast handle him, right? I mean, the Beast right now, I think, is sitting on 2.5 out of 3. So he's definitely in, you know, his beastly form. He's got beast mode engaged. And he's going to have to be able to deal with Tuan Min if he wants to win this match for the India Yogis, because they've got only 1 point lead.
Yeah, and Adiban here choosing a modern setup, you know, like a very simple G6, Bishop G7. I stated how I didn't like the way Tigran Petrosian played it against David Navara earlier. We'll see if Adiban is up to the task. But Min Lei here with the white pieces, no stranger to coming in clutch in online events. He's played very well in many Title Tuesdays. And so, you know, he has his hands full because he is playing a very talented grandmaster and a very adventurous one. But I think he can handle it.
And he's showing like he might prefer to have a King's Indian over a Pierce with his approach so far.
And well, Adiban had some of the highlight finishes of last year's Pro Chess League. And any event that he's in, he is likely to win a brilliancy prize because it's just his style. He has flair. He's not afraid of anybody. But right now, like I said, this is not a player to underestimate. Not to underestimate. There
Indeed.
We go. Proper English.
Don't take him. Don't underestimate him. Don't take him for granted.
You got it.
Don't overlook him. The first time he played in Wake on Zay, I had to do like 4 or at least 4 videos about his games, maybe 5. Like they were just like mind blowing. So,
and we actually have information from Isaac Steinkamp because Min Lei used to play for the Pittsburgh Pawn Grabbers in previous iterations of the league when that team existed. Apparently, in this position, instead of C4, he was always playing Bishop F4 for London setup. So clearly, this is some preparation on his part. And actually, a draw was offered by Min Lei and declined by Adiban. So what do you make of that draw offer when your team is down 1 point for the Bulldogs and you have the white pieces?
I don't know. He's deploying all the weapons, right? He's like, I don't know. He plays a lot online. He probably knows like tricks for getting people's heads. I'm worried for the Beast almost.
You know, oftentimes players do that. They offer a draw just to see what their opponent's thinking and to see the reaction. And well, you know, Adiban says no. He wants to fight, and why not? He is the stronger of the 2 players, but still a lot of life left. Obviously, it's a very early stage of this game. Yeah,
I guess like, it's a good check. It's like, do you really think you're better than me? Do you really think you're better than me? You know, and looking at the position, Adiban's position, you know, out of the opening, black this early in the game, he's obviously going to have kind of a bad position. So it's a really good way to check, right? Like, you know, your position's not that good. So are you going to hesitate, or do you think you're so much better than me that you don't even have to think about it? You just move right away.
Yeah, he's now not moving right away. He's spent some time, you know, like 40 seconds here, and Min Lei takes a quick lead on the clock. But all right.
But he did only take like 2 seconds on the draw offer.
Yes,
right.
He declined instantly.
He took 40 seconds on his move, but he showed a lot of confidence in how he faced the draw offer. So,
well, I have a question for you, David, as a manager in the Pro Chess League. When you have 3 teammates' games to look at, you're up by 1 point. How much are you like toggling between your own game and between the rest of the players in your team to see what result might be necessary?
I think that may depend player to player, and there'd be maybe some players who like spend a lot of time toggling and others who just play. I generally advise my players to just play like this early in the game. Like, what's the point for Pragnananda to like click over here to see Adiban's position? And like it's not like the probability of a loss, draw, or win is like super defined at this point, right? So
Right.
I'm not sure what like information like a teammate's going to get by clicking around at this point. You know, maybe I'm missing something, but I've never been clear on what you're supposed to figure out by doing that.
Yeah, no, it may make you more nervous, right? Because you're like so focused on your other players' games, and you're not paying the full amount of attention to your own. So let's actually look at some other matchups that we have going on here, because it is a close match. And
Okay.
Which of the games are catching your eye?
I'm clicking here. Got my eye on Shant trying to go 4-0, and it's an interesting position. Honestly, what Antal has done, grabbing so much space,
but leaving behind squares.
Right? So this early on, it's always like a huge trade-off. Knight G6 prevents Knight E5.
I love these positions for white.
It's very interesting. I play these positions for white usually because I expect them to be good for white, but I'm not always clear on how to best play them.
Yeah, and this bishop on G2, it's like, you have the two bishops for white. You want that bishop to get open. It's not going to get open on this diagonal where it currently sits, at least not easily, because of black's very strong pawn foundation on the light square pawn chain here. H4, try to go H5 is certainly an idea that I would try to use for Shant Sargsyan, because the knight on G6, well, it's not doing that much. It is covering the E5 square and gaining space with the H4, H5, and maybe even H6 move. Seems like it just helps white's initiative. But he's taking away the E file. You can't play a rook to E8, as now I'm lined up perfectly to take on E8 and get two rooks for the queen.
Yeah, so it feels like pushing F4 for black isn't going to help much. If white plays G4, the pawn will mostly block the black pieces. Would you agree, or do you think that G4 is really weakening for white?
No, you're totally right. And the big problem for black is H6 doesn't work out, because that would trap the bishop, but I can just move my queen somewhere like queen C2 or queen D3, hit your knight on G6, and, well, your actually knight has nowhere to go. So that's the worst part about it. And the
worst part of it is you've got nowhere to go. Yeah. All right. So he leads with H6. Again, we could see possibly the move queen E6 here. But okay, he plays the simple move. I think black wanted to play knight F6 to E4 probably. And so that's why, like, I would wonder, is there some way to keep, to not give black time to get the knight through the F6 square?
Well, actually, knight F6 might be meant by queen E6 anyway, because the knight on G6 is hanging. So knight F6,
so no knight
queen
E4
E6,
yet.
no knight E4, as that's a free piece on G6. And the good news about white's setup in general is that even if you get a knight to E4, at some point I have the hope of playing F2 to F3. It's very difficult with my pawn on G3.
Yeah.
But black doesn't have that same luxury, as your pawns are on F5 and D5. The square in between them is a loose one.
All right. Well, knight D7 is seen, and I'd be worried about knight E4, because with my pawn on H3 instead of H2 and G3 kind of weaker, I find it really hard to deal with the knight on E4. So I would love to prevent that if at all possible. Yeah,
so I think queen E6, at least it prevents it for the moment. And also black is going rook A to E8 with a knight covering the E8 square. So black is just a couple moves away from organizing his pieces in a manner that like limits his problem. So I think queen E6 is just a way to, it actually just begs the question, how do you defend this pawn on F5? Because from E6, it's just directly under attack.
Maybe it's just queen D7.
Okay, plays queen E6. And queen D7, I think endgames are just good for white.
Right. Oh, and also we fall with rook E6. Then you have to play rook F6, taking more material off the board. Then rook FE1.
Yep.
Yeah. And white's got the bishop here eventually in some scenarios.
Then finally H4, H5 will come. The bishop will go to H3 to pressurize the F5 square. Yeah, it simply looks good for white. So because queen E6 move, we have Gergely Antal on screen here. He's trying to figure it out. He looks very focused, but I'm liking Shant Sargsyan's chances to go 4-0.
Yeah, I mean, his whole problem seems to be this dangling knight on G6. Like,
I hate knights on G6. B3.
There's all these things that seem like they could be okay, right? Like I could play F4, G4, rook E8, but then again, queen F5, and like my stupid knight, like I just don't quite know how to handle it.
Yep. And, he went for the queen trade, but, he's in a position that white will be playing for 2 results. I liked your decision to trade queens by rook to e6. That feels like white should be favored there. So good news for the Eagles. They only need 1.5 points to clinch the match. And it's a good start for them to see Sean Sargsyan have the lead in this game.
Yeah. Let's see how Audubon's doing now against Tuan Min. Okay. Material still equal, but white has a firm position in the center.
Yep.
D6 is dangling.
Knight b6 is a threat. Maybe even knight f6 check if you want to get the bishop. This looks bad for black.
If we trade on d5 as black here to deal with, because all those threats you mentioned were with the knight, right? If we trade on d5 here for black, then all of us who've been watching today know that after bishop d5, these opposite colored bishops are risky.
Right.
Still risky.
Right. People like to believe that opposite colored bishops might kind of mitigate the disaster, but I mean, this bishop on d5 is a beautiful piece.
Okay, queen c5. That covered most of those problems, right? d6, b6.
It did. What if I just play like b3 because my pawn on b2 is hanging? Actually, right. b4 is more direct.
Either way, I'll trade on b3 and play rook to a2.
Okay, so you're trying to go rook to a2, but I was going to go b4. Oh, my pawn f2 is hanging.
Yeah, looks like Tuan Min saw all that based on his move, right?
Yeah, I think the king was on g1 because why is the king on h2? I'm like, it looks like a pretty normal position, but the king is on h2 for no apparent reason. So in my head, I'm calculating the position with the king on g1, but
yeah,
with it there, you're right. The rook coming to a2 would have hit the f2 pawn. So rook d2, a good starting move. b4 will at some point be an option, perhaps, and still some pressure that Audubon has to figure out how to deal with. I still prefer white, but I don't think the advantage is so great.
Yeah, so what does he want to do from here?
Maybe double rooks on either, I don't know which file, E or D file, but both are an option. He played
They're always like forked everywhere, kind of annoying. Okay. It's a tough position for him.
And knight f6 check is always a possibility for white, just to make black's king feel less safe, to open up the bishop on g2 to the b7 pawn. d6 is still always a target. I don't know if I like the liquidation that might occur after that, but just keeping that idea in the back of my head is knight f6 check might make black's life very difficult.
I like Pragnananda's position, although he's having a serious think about it against Sventika. I love how that black king is open and white's not even down material for it.
Okay, and opening that game.
Like f6, h7, and c5 are all almost hanging, right?
Yeah, so we have this game between Pragnananda here, and as you're pointing out, many hanging pawns, hanging pieces. And what is all day we've been talking about a rook staring down on a queen. This time it's white's rook rather than black's, but this knight is just pinned here, and I don't know how it intends to get out. I think white is just cruising. I
was thinking about knight c5, bishop c5, d takes e6, and I'm not sure what was wrong with it because it looked like completely killer.
It's crushing.
Because then I just wanted to play queen h5 next move and just win the bishop. I don't even care about checkmating the king. Like, isn't it over?
Yes.
Okay.
So I think that was great. And what he's doing is, well, I guess he's saying the f6 pawn is now pinned. So you can't play f5, which is generally a useful move to break the attack.
What he's doing will also be good. Like he could play knight g4 probably and have a decisive attack, right? Like
take on c5 for, maybe not take on c5. Actually, it still works. I blundered, but my blunder worked out for me.
Your blunder worked.
Like knight c5, bishop c5, knight g4. I was like, oh, bishop f2 check.
Yeah.
And now the rook is hanging, but after king f2, thankfully, I have queen f6 check. I take a rook with check, and white's just dominating that position up at least a piece. So I blundered into something successful. I failed upwards.
Yeah. Or in the words of Kanye, you reached for the clouds and you reached for the stars and you fell but landed on a cloud.
Yep. Look at you. You hitting some Kanye in here. Wasn't expecting that from you, David. Not going to lie. But you got it. You got that pop culture game strong.
Yeah, I'm not very good at pop culture, but I know some rap.
Well, this one looks like a wrap to me. So let's get off this Pragnananda game.
Yeah.
It's going to push the India yogis within striking distance of clinching the match. So where should we go to next?
Maybe check in on Navara quickly.
Okay, it's the former prodigy. And he's taking on Zavan Andriasian. And whoa, that queen on A1 looks good.
Yeah. She's got the dark squares. The knights look pretty good. The black knight on B4 is a little bit of a wanderer.
Mm-hmm. But how is it? White's position looks good to me, but I don't know how to actually make progress.
I'm thinking maybe bishop E4.
Okay, what's your plan? Well, actually, that might hang up.
But I didn't look at bishop takes C4 long enough, did I?
Right. Although you have some kind of queen A check, which saves the day. At least saves the day from losing material. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, something like this.
All right, F5. Better.
Aggressive.
So bishop takes C4 seems likely.
Actually, wait. This just looks good for black. Bishop C4, you have to take with a knight. It's under attack. And then B5, I kick your knight away from the
E3. Then B5, rather than even looking at the F5 pawn. Just play B5. That's awkward. That's
just turning around real fast.
So is white's position not as good as we maybe first thought?
I guess it was a little bit too loose. And he actually has done this immediately. Andriasian didn't need to be told twice. He played B5. And Zavan, he's one of the most experienced players in all of the Pro Chess League, not just for Armenia. But he finds his B5 move, kicks the knight away. And David Navara is probably kicking himself because his position looked good and now it looks terrible.
It's going to be really, really critical for the Hunters if Zavan scores here against Navara. This, to me, is kind of the game they needed. And also, Zavan's on 2.5 out of 3. So if he scores here against Navara, then that's the answer to my question about the Eagles for this year, right? I mean, they're going to be a really strong team. And there's a piece sack, which kind of answers our evaluation here.
Yep.
Clearly a good position for black.
And you don't even have to take the piece. That's how good your position is, because you can just take back on G6. But I don't see the problem with taking on C4. And the knight that you called a wanderer actually helps defend the black king, because the bishop can't come to D5 with check as the knight covers the square.
Yeah. Yeah, I was worried about the knight on B4, but Zavan's making it work without any trouble.
Looks done so.
Yeah.
So let's keep on moving.
God, one of the Turkish players is playing sort of like a Benoni by accident. That's
okay. Which player is that?
That's not good. That's Emre Can, the mirror man.
Okay.
Man, somehow he's got himself into a Benoni. Ugh.
Ooh, wait, isn't black missing a G pawn somehow?
Yeah.
1, 2, 6 and 1, 2, 5. I mean, black's
missing a G pawn and a bishop on the long diagonal. If he had a bishop on the long diagonal, then actually he would have one of the better Benonis I've ever seen. But
honestly, what black needs is a pawn on G5. So if I could take this pawn on B5 and put it on G5, then I'm like, okay, black's chances seem to improve, because what you're trying to do is claim the E5 square for your knight. But without a G pawn, it's simply down a pawn. White just leaves the position as such, and it's a problem. So Pragnananda won his game, by the way. He took out,
there it is.
He took out Svantika on the fourth board. Also, having Pragnananda as your fourth board is just sick. Like, this dude is, how old is he? Like 14?
14. He's 14.
He's crossing 2,600. He's 14 years old. He's beating up on people. Very, very talented player, of course.
Yeah, that was a pretty brutal game. That particular game.
Yeah, the end is not pretty. So where else can we go to? I see the game between Evgeny Posty and Mustafa Ilmaz. Looks pretty interesting to me at first glance, with the king on F2. And is that knight on G3 trapped? Oh my gosh, the knight's trapped, isn't it? Yep.
Let's see.
It can't move.
Can't really move. The rook just moved to avoid king G3, queen E1. So sort of renewing that threat. What's his counterplay? He's got some kind of threat on E3, but the bishop's covering knight F5, so he can't do like knight E3, king G3, knight F5.
I think just in the style of Vlad Dobrov and winning for Mustafa.
In the style of Vlad Dobrov, with like your position looks loose, but despite E3 hanging, you win a knight that you trap oddly.
Yep. Pieces count.
What
apparently.
What about the horrible move G5, Knight D5?
Oof. Yeah,
Sorry.
That's
you didn't even want to hear about it. Okay.
Nope. I'm going to move on from this game because we both, I think, are over it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's looking really, really grim.
We have the game between Alexander Ipatov against Daniel Fridman. And while Ipatov's position, he's simply down a pawn, and that pawn is a dangerous passer on the C3 square. I think he's on the verge of losing this one. We talked about Israel didn't win games.
For 2 rounds. They're going to win more games in the 4th round than in the first 3 rounds, perhaps. And it's what they need if they want to come back in a match. I mean, down 2 games. The white king is kind of exposed too. It's like
everything going wrong for Sasha here. Just king's exposed, down a pawn, no real plan of action whatsoever. You can't take on C3 ever because queen E1 check will pick up the rook on C3. That's why he couldn't take it last move, because queen B2 check would have stolen the rook. Bad news for Ipatov.
Yeah. I'm not sure how to win it, but I understand that it's very hard for white to play at all.
Yeah, and Ipatov probably playing from a dorm room or from his home, or somewhere, a conference center in St. Louis University, as he's a student there for their team. But
Shant just made it 4. Shant just made it 4, and that, I mean, I think that the hunters are pretty much have been hunted down themselves here. I don't think they've got much hope left after that.
And we talk about 2 bishops advantage. This is the epitome of a 2 bishops advantage. You have 2 bishops against 2 knights. Your bishops are dominating. These knights are passive and stepping on each other's toes. Yikes. Good finish for Shant Sargsyan for the Armenia Eagles.
Looks like it was pretty clean, right? He's got the bishop here. He's got the pawn majority. He's got the extra pawn, and he's got the tactic.
Yep. Clean all right. And actually, look what happened. He went this rook E6, rook E1 thing, and after knight F8, he just went bishop H3 and said, well, your pawn on F5 is weak. You can't even play G6 because your pawn H6 is under attack. So he simply stole a pawn, went knight E5. That's such a nice move, because you can take on F4 and then double your pawns. But he plays knight E5, and the point is now your pawn's really under attack. Knight F7 check is a threat, and after bishop E5, D takes E5, well, your knight's under attack and your pawn's under attack as well. So nice win for Shant Sargsyan.
Yeah. Now I've got my model game for the next time somebody plays D5 and F5 against me. There's another intense game I just wanted to go over to, which was a Sethu Rahman game.
Okay.
It looks like, well, maybe the Bulldogs just going to take a draw now, but he just played knight F5 check, like just as we were looking at the end of the Shant game.
Was that even necessary? I mean, white's not down any material. I guess
he wasn't down any material. He didn't have to do it. But okay, he takes the draw. That's like the kind of moment where hopefully he like quickly glanced at the other boards on his team before taking the draw, right? His team's down 1 point, and he's in no way forced to play knight F5. I mean, he's got a perfectly comfortable position. Or maybe he wasn't sure what else to do.
Well, there might not have been anything there, actually, as it appears, but they're down 2 points because Pragnananda won his game in the round. So that means with that draw, they're officially should be at 8 points for the India Yogis. And that means they can no longer lose the match. They need 1 more draw in the remaining board. So let's go to Adiban's position, because I see both kings exposed here. The queen on B6 pinning the rook on E3, the 2 rooks on the 7th rank for black. And rook E2. That rook is pinned. F6, just the calm move saying your rook on E3 is under attack. No way to protect. It's done. Yep, it's over. And
the Yogis survived the Bulldogs, I guess, but I mean, just barely. Like that's the Bulldogs will be feared. They will be taken seriously, at least.
They certainly should be taken seriously because they put up a real fight here. Unfortunately, when your Bulldog is no match for a beast, and Adiban says, plays rook to E2. Rook is pinned, as mentioned. Earlier, we liked Minlay's position a lot, but things must have gone south in mutual time trouble. So, the India Yogis have clinched. They've won their match, and we have 2 games remaining here, one between Tigran Petrosian and Peter Prohaska.
And is the final score that the Knights win by 1 game because of this checkmate from Mustafa Ilmaz? Because they lost 2 games this round, but it looks like Ilmaz may have gotten them to 8.5 points here.
Yilmaz was the hero for the Turkey Knights, right? Just able to beat Evgeny Posty. And Evgeny Posty, typically a guy who really doesn't lose that many games, I feel like. But here it, did not go his way. And Zavin Andriasian officially defeated David Navara. He's up 2 nights.
That's impressive.
Mating at the end. And that leaves us with just Tigran and Peter Prohaska. But that means all results are done with. We have the India Yogis winning their matchup. The Armenia Eagles, honestly, crushing the Hungary Hunters. And then the Turkey Knights, by the slimmest of margins, are the champions. Oh, Rook H8 mate is coming. So Tigran.
That's pretty good.
Look at this.
So the Eagles, like, racking it up in the end, they sort of like broke through the opposition at this point.
Yep. Just king takes g4, and then black will try to play g5 to give the king some space. But the knight on c3 is also hanging for good measure, right? Like rook takes c3.
Yeah. So king h5.
Oh wait, the knight was hanging for free.
Yeah.
Okay.
He was going for mate.
He honestly, now it's like possible he doesn't win this game anymore.
But yeah, made it much more complicated actually.
Knight g5 check. You can't take on h. Oh, you can't take on h6. You protect the rook. The knight protects the rook.
Oh God! And instead, it's mate in 1.
Oh my gosh!
What?
Oh, it's a self-mate. It's a self-mate. After he went knight f1, both to attack the pawn e3, but also to protect the rook. And the whole point is after check, oh my gosh, you can take on h6. Rook h8 check is made by king to g7, and as mentioned, the knight protects the rook here, and there's not enough material left. So unfortunately for Peter Prohaska, okay, the match was already out of hand.
Yeah.
Getting mated in one move, that is really a devastating conclusion to was already a demolition in favor of the Armenian Eagles.
Yeah. Yeah. So Armenia looks pretty good. I mean, especially considering that Tigran was playing from like a hospital bed, we found out. They had a great performance today.
They really
looked
did.
Strong.
And Tigran there, I would say coming up clutch, but the match is already over, as mentioned. But every single point matters, especially in this format where you get 10 points per match victory and then 1 point added on to your total for every board point you get. So you really want to earn all of these points, as many as you can, especially early in the season, rack them up. That way later you don't have to be concerned about jockeying for position. So
Mythic Applesauce in chat says some really stiff competition for blunder of the week here. At first, I thought he was going to say there's really stiff competition in the Pro Chess League this year, right? Because there's a lot of good players. But no, it was funnier than that.
That is a really, I think that wins. It may be recency bias, David, but getting yourself checkmated like this, that's.
But do you remember that other candidate was like Queen D3 check, and then the Queen was just took it in like an equal Queen and Pawn ending?
But I'll also add that if we go back, 5 moves or so to this point after G5, like this knight on C3 was just hanging. So the fact that the whole rest of this game was mutual time trouble,
right?
And they were playing bullet chess at this point, but it was a comedy of errors, and Black made the final error and was the recipient of a pretty nasty checkmate. Yeah.
So Robert, I don't know exactly what the plans are and for, what we're supposed to cover and what, slides you have to show, but I feel like we've never mentioned the question of the day. Should we mention that?
Sure. Well, I have no idea what it was, actually.
I'll tell you it. The question of the day was, which team do you think is the favorite in the Eastern Division?
Aha.
And I don't know if we were supposed to answer it before seeing them play today or after we see them play, but either way, it's a good question.
It's a very good question, and it's hard to kind of argue against China or Russia. I don't know which one, and I don't actually take this week's final result like as being super important, just because there are players who weren't competing for both sides, right? Russia has many talented grandmasters who didn't show up. I mean, 2 of their players were last-minute substitutions, and for China, well, if they can get some of their superstars in the team, they'll be a force. But of the players who did play today, we have to give a shout out to Pragnananda, because the youngster, when he's one of your last boards and he's going 3 out of 4, that's a really important performance. Granted, they were playing a low-rated team, so it's more expected for him to have a great score against them. But don't be surprised when he does this week after week.
Yeah, I wouldn't be. I think Audubon looked good, because he managed to take out Tuan Min Lei in that last round and score 3.5 out of 4. So I would expect a happy tweet about how he how he beast moded again from him. And Shant, of course, 4-0, lighting up the fantasy brackets again.
You know, at this point, he's not even doing anything special because he does it all the time, and everybody chooses him for their fantasy team. So,
yeah,
you know,
it's not like a secret.
it's par for the course at this point. But he's been a real menace, as was Wesley So. And we saw that the other day on Monday. A player like Wesley So has continuously dominated in the Pro Chess League. He's actually a Speed Chess Championship final. You know, he made the final of that as well. So he will play Hikaru Nakamura in the Speed Chess Championship finale. Well, time and date to be determined, but that is the final matchup of that event. So
I think that overall the favorite in this Eastern Division, my answer would be China, because Ding Liren, if he plays a couple matches for them, I think they can just like bring out the lineup that's the most comparable to like, you know, an Olympiad team, like what St. Louis has. I think if they bring out lineups with Ding Liren and Wei Yi and, you know, one or two other 2700s, they have sort of like the highest ceiling of like a potential team. They didn't bring out that kind of lineup today. From what I saw today, the Armenians looked the best of the eight teams today.
Yeah, Armenia, they may not have the highest ratings in terms of classical chess, but they're very even across their four boards. Tough matchup for any team. Very experienced, extremely good on the Chess.com server. And the India Yogis, I think that they may have a marquee signing or two in the works. So we have to await word on that. But, you know, I have some inside information that I can't quite spill. But
okay. I mean, the public information is that they have Hari Krishna and Vidit. So they can upgrade even from what we saw today.
Exactly. So they can upgrade already with their lineup, but they have a couple of potential signings going on. So we'll await to see that. Of course, tomorrow we have more Pro Chess League coverage coming your way. We have the final division to go with the Central Division is tomorrow. Some exciting matchups in that division. We have Norway versus Sweden, the Netherlands versus Italy, Spain versus Germany, France versus Poland. But David, it's been an absolute pleasure. Any final thoughts before we sign off here?
No, it was fun. It was exciting. I can't wait to see more.
Okay, well, we're back tomorrow, 9:30 a.m. Pacific time. So tune in for the Central Division. Thank you, everybody, for watching us. It was a great time. Please come back tomorrow.